The snow lay thick upon the roads that led to the outskirts of town, each flake drifting like a small whispered secret from the gray sky. The wind carried a brittle chill, threading its way between the skeletal limbs of bare trees, curling around fences, and stirring the smoke that rose from chimneys in soft, curling plumes. In the distance, the horizon melted into a haze of white and pale gold, the first breath of dawn breaking quietly, almost reluctantly, over the world. On the edge of this frostbitten landscape sat a small cabin, humble yet stubborn against the winter. Its timbers, darkened by years and storms, bore witness to a life lived with steady hands and patient heart. From inside, a woman's quiet hum stirred the air, mingling with the crackle of firewood burning in the hearth. She moved with a certain rhythm, her hands sure and deliberate as they tended to the day's first chores. Chopping wood, brushing away the frost from the doorstep, feeding the horses in the small corral behind the cabin. Each action carried the weight of habit, of resilience, and yet of softness beneath the strength. The widow, though young enough to still dream, carried the kind of quiet gravity only loss can teach. The town knew her as capable, independent, a woman who did not bend easily to gossip or the sway of idle men. Some whispered behind curtains that she had wealth enough to tempt the bold, that her beauty, tempered by grief, could charm the careless. But she bore such talk with a calm grace, a smile never forced, eyes always steady, like sunlight glinting off snow, warm and sharp at once. It was along the snow-crusted road that morning a rider appeared, cutting a lone figure against the white. The man was of middling build, roughened by sun and wind, and yet he carried the manner of one who expected deference. His boots struck the snow with a rhythm that seemed to demand attention, and his coat, fur-lined and heavy, made him appear larger than he was, as if size alone could sway the world to his will. He halted before her cabin, his horse stamping impatiently. Without dismounting, he called out, his voice carrying a casual arrogance across the cold air. 10 furs, he said, for one night. There was no preamble, no courtesy in his tone, only the assumption that she would comply, that she would see the merit in his proposition, that she would see only what he offered rather than what she was. The widow paused, leaning lightly against the doorway, her hands still dusted with snow. She watched him, really watched, with eyes that saw more than the coat or the words. And then, slowly, a smile touched her lips, not of amusement or ridicule but of quiet, profound knowing. Her gaze, steady and unhurried, held a depth he could not fathom. A loyal dog padded along her heels, soft paws pressing into the snow, and regarded the man with cautious suspicion. A small neighbor child, peeking through the fence, caught sight of the visitor and turned quickly, muttering something about the strange, impudent man. Even the horses lifted their heads, ears pricked, sensing tension and watching the figure who dared breach their mistress's ordered world. He dismounted at last, boots crunching the frozen ground, and spoke again, expecting words that would bend to his desire. But she met each of his sentences with a calm counter, her voice low and melodic, flowing like the smoke curling from her hearth. She did not scold, did not challenge with heat, only a subtle wit, an intelligence that chipped away at his certainty. 10 furs, she said softly, for one night. Perhaps more, she hinted, though not as a promise, more as a question, a puzzle. The wind shifted then, stirring the loose snow and carrying with it the scent of pine and burning wood. The man found himself unmoored, unsettled by the quiet authority of her presence, by the gentle force of a woman who needed no display of strength to command respect. He had expected a transaction. She offered instead a subtle revelation, the knowledge that some things in this world could not be bought, that some wealth lay not in fur or coin, but in patience, in wit, in the quiet certainty of self-possession. The snow fell again, soft and endless, as if the sky itself had paused to witness the moment. Her gaze lingered on him, not with contempt, not with desire, but with something richer, an assessment, a knowing. And in that look, he glimpsed the truth he had not anticipated, that she was neither a prize nor a target, but a woman with depths he could not reach with brash words or coin. The morning stretched, slow and deliberate. Footsteps, breath, firelight, and the quiet crackle of life moving inside and outside her cabin. All spoke of a world where patience carried power, where dignity and resilience outshone superficial desire. And as he stood there, caught between expectation and the unyielding reality of her presence, he began to understand, perhaps too late, that what he sought could never be forced, only earned in the unspoken economy of trust and respect. And so the winter roads lay quiet once more, save for the distant echo of a man learning slowly that not all gifts could be measured in furs. Within the cabin she returned to her fire, to the rhythm of her life, a small smile lingering, hinting at the story yet to unfold, a story where the heart, not the coin, would hold dominion. Night came on quietly, folding the snow-clad world in soft, silver darkness. The wind had stilled, leaving only the faint creak of timber in the widow's cabin and the steady murmur of the hearth. Shadows stretched long and lazy across the rough wooden floor, flickering with every whisper of flame. In this dim light, the room felt both intimate and infinite, a private universe bounded by the warmth of fire and the hush of winter. The man who had offered 10 furs lingered still, drawn by curiosity as much as desire. His coat was dusted with the thin powder of snow, his boots leaving damp prints along the worn boards. He spoke, his tone pressed with expectation, words meant to assert, to command, to tempt. But she met each with a calmness that was almost a song, measured, unhurried, her voice flowing like smoke around him. There was no anger, no urgency, only a patience that unsettled him more than a storm ever could. She moved between tasks, hands folding cloth, stacking wood, tending the kettle over the fire, and yet each movement carried a grace that reminded him, or perhaps revealed for the first time, that she was not a woman to be bargained with, not one to bend to impatience. Her eyes caught the glint of the candlelight, and in them danced the quiet humor of one who knows the world more deeply than the moment demands. The first man pressed again, trying now to turn words into a weapon, but she let them slide past, catching only the shadows behind them, weighing them lightly, like one counts the rhythm of falling snow. There was a cleverness in her that required attention, a subtle game unfolding between them. He thought he led, but she was already steps ahead, her moves gentle yet decisive, like the pull of the tide beneath a calm surface. Outside, footsteps crunched softly along the snow. Another man had come to town, a quiet, steady presence, unassuming yet impossible to ignore. He paused at the edge of the widow's property, watching from the shadow of the fence. Unlike the first, he made no demand, asked no favors. He simply observed, patient and deliberate, sensing the rhythm of her world without intruding upon it. He saw the flicker of firelight on her face, the calm strength in her hands, the subtle authority in her posture. And he understood what the first man could not, that her worth was measured not by coin nor by furs, but by courage, intelligence, and unspoken dignity. The child from the neighboring homestead peered again through the frost-crusted fence, curious, sensing the tension, but hesitant to interrupt. Even the dog, loyal and watchful, paced near the cabin, alert to the rhythm of the men's intentions, recognizing instinctively which presence carried respect and which carried assumption. In the quiet of night, the smallest gestures spoke volumes. The tilt of a head, the gentle folding of hands, the way eyes met and lingered without speaking. The first man, growing restless, attempted to charm her, to hint at promises, at comfort, at the luxury his wealth might bring. But the widow responded with subtlety, teasing lightly, guiding the conversation with wit rather than force, a dance of words where the steps were invisible to all but the keenest eye. Her calm deflected his bravado, her smile did not invite, but illuminated a deeper truth, that patience and perception are mightier than any coin or possession. Inside the cabin, shadows grew longer and deeper, wrapping corners in velvet darkness. Candlelight flickered, throwing a moving tapestry across the walls, illuminating her expression, the soft rise and fall of her chest, the gentle certainty in the way she moved. She spoke little of herself, letting only hints drift into the room like fine dust. The memory of a husband lost too soon, the strength carved from grief, the humor that survived even the coldest winters. The second man shifted his weight, careful not to disturb the quiet equilibrium, sensing the delicacy of what was unfolding. He admired the way she engaged the first man, not with contempt nor with fear but with clarity and control. He noted the intelligence behind her restraint, the way she allowed a man to reveal his character in full, and yet remained untouched by expectation or desire. Her world was one of patience, of measured steps, of understanding that true power lies in observation, not aggression. Time slipped on as the night deepened, the wind returning in soft sighs that brushed against the cabin walls. The first man, frustrated by his inability to bend her to his will, finally left with a mixture of anger and awe, his steps heavy, the snow muffling the echoes of his departure. Outside, the second man remained, watching her retreat into the warmth of her firelight, sensing the quiet poetry of her existence, the rare blend of courage and gentleness that few would ever understand. The widow, alone once more, let the fire lull her into thought. She considered the man who had left, and the one who had stayed in quiet admiration. A small smile touched her lips. In this silent world, she realized, true understanding cannot be demanded, nor purchased, nor coerced. It is given slowly, gently, earned through the quiet acts of attention, respect, and patience. And in that realization she felt the faint stirrings of something new, a possibility, a connection, a trust that might yet grow if nurtured with care. The night settled fully, heavy with snow and silence, carrying a promise of what might come. The widow tended her fire, the dog at her heels, shadows dancing along the walls, and in the stillness she dreamed, not of wealth or conquest, but of understanding, of shared kindness, and of the subtle unfolding of hearts in ways only the patient could see. The stage was set, the players in place, and the story whispered onward, ready to reveal the depths that lay beneath the surface of snow and shadow. The next morning arrived not with a clamor, but with a soft sigh of light over the snow-dusted hills. The wind had calmed, leaving a world washed in pale silver and gold, as if the earth itself had exhaled after a long, quiet night. The widow moved through her small cabin with a serenity that seemed to grow from the very walls, every step measured, every gesture purposeful, yet gentle. The kettle sang softly over the fire, filling the air with warmth and a hint of sweet herbs. Outside, the horses stamped softly, impatient for feed, their breath curling in tiny clouds that vanished into the morning. The second man lingered near the corral, unseen but not unnoticed. He watched her from a respectful distance, noting the small rhythm of her life, the way she brushed snow from the corral fence, the precise tilt of her hands as she measured oats for the horses, the gentle way she murmured to her dog, who padded faithfully beside her. He saw the careful strength in her movements, the dignity in each small act. There was no rush, no performance, only life lived fully, quietly, honestly. And in that, he found himself drawn, not by desire, but by something rarer, respect that deepened with each passing hour. The first man returned that evening, his pride bruised, his confidence shaken by the subtle intelligence he could not bend. He tried again to charm, to coerce, to promise, yet she met each advance with measured patience. Her words were soft but precise, each sentence a gentle parry, each look a quiet assertion. He began to realize that no coin, no furs, no shallow flattery could sway her. She offered him nothing he expected, nothing he could claim, and in that he felt the first pangs of awe and frustration intertwined. Meanwhile, the second man made his presence known, not with force but with subtle acts of assistance. He brought in firewood when hers had dwindled, stoked the hearth while she tended the kettle, and offered quiet companionship that required no explanations. His presence was a calm river beside her, steady and unobtrusive, allowing her world to move at its natural pace. He did not demand her attention. He simply noticed her strength, admired her grace, and allowed a space where trust could grow unhurriedly, like the slow thaw of winter snow. Small moments began to stretch longer, becoming quietly intimate. They shared tea near the hearth, the steam curling like wisps of unspoken words. She spoke of simple things, the horses' habits, the changes of the season, the tasks that kept her days measured. He listened, attentive, learning not to interrupt the rhythm of her world. Occasionally, a shared laugh would slip between them, soft, almost hesitant, yet carrying the weight of understanding, a small bridge across the still, cautious distance between hearts. The first man, growing impatient, made a mistake one evening. He assumed she would yield, assumed that persistence would turn her calm into acquiescence. But she turned the moment to her advantage, not with anger, but with the quiet brilliance of one who knows the measure of their own strength. She offered him a choice, framed in words that sounded simple but carried consequence. The man realized too late that he had been playing a game he did not understand. With a storm of pride and frustration, he departed once more, leaving behind only the echo of his boots in the snow, the faint imprint of arrogance erased by humility. The second man remained, silent witness to her quiet victory. He saw the way her shoulders relaxed after the first man's departure, the slight smile that played at her lips, the gentle exhale that spoke of relief and triumph. He understood the depth of her courage, the subtle intelligence that guided her life. In that understanding, a slow warmth grew, unspoken yet undeniable, a seed of trust, a flicker of something more profound than admiration, waiting patiently in the shadows of a winter day. Evening came, carrying with it a soft hush, as though the world held its breath. The widow and the second man walked along the edge of her property, the snow crunching softly beneath their boots, the horizon glowing faintly with the last light of day. Words were few, unnecessary, for the silence between them carried its own conversation. They noticed the same things, the way frost formed on the edges of leaves, the distant trail of a coyote, the delicate swirl of smoke rising from her chimney. And in that shared noticing, a subtle intimacy began to take root, the kind that blooms slowly, patiently, between two souls who see and respect one another. Back in the cabin, the fire cast its warm glow across the room, illuminating the quiet contentment of her life. Shadows danced along the walls, stretching and shrinking with the flicker of flame. She tended the hearth, the second man stoking it gently beside her. The dog curled at her feet, breathing softly, and for a moment, the world seemed perfectly balanced, calm, resilient, full of understated triumphs and quiet joys. In these moments, the widow realized something she had long known but rarely acknowledged. Not all gifts are bought. Some are earned through patience, through respect, through the willingness to understand without demanding or claiming. The second man's quiet presence, steady and thoughtful, offered her something richer than coin or furs: recognition of her worth, admiration of her strength, and the slow, careful unfolding of trust. The snow fell softly outside, each flake a whisper against the stillness of the evening. She looked to the second man and saw not just a companion, but a mirror for her own quiet courage, a witness to her resilience. And in that reflection, a new chapter began, fragile and delicate, yet carrying the promise of something enduring. It was a gentle unfolding, a story not of instant conquest, but of patient recognition, the kind that grows in the quiet spaces between winter winds and firelight. The snow lay quiet under the pale light of dawn, soft and unbroken, as if the world itself waited in hushed anticipation. The widow's cabin breathed warmth into the frozen morning, smoke curling lazily from the chimney, mingling with the crisp scent of pine and frost. Inside, the hearth glowed amber, reflecting off polished wood and the careful order of a life shaped by patience and resilience. The first man returned that day, his pride bruised, his confidence fraying at the edges. He carried himself with the same arrogance, but beneath it stirred a quiet unease. He had believed that wealth and persistence could bend any will, that charm and pressure were enough to claim what he desired. But the widow had taught him, through silence, wit, and gentle intelligence, that some things could never be forced. Now he arrived expecting an easy conquest, and found instead a woman who stood calm, unshaken, her eyes bright with a quiet, knowing fire. He spoke again of furs and fleeting nights, of promises and comfort, but she met him not with anger, nor with hesitation, but with subtle brilliance. She offered him something he had never anticipated, not what he demanded but what he needed to see, the reflection of his own shallow intentions stripped bare and exposed. With a gentle, almost imperceptible smile, she revealed the cleverness of her plan. The furs he had sought so cheaply, he would not take from her. Instead, she presented him with a small chest, carefully wrapped, containing what he believed he desired, yet inside lay only a mirror of his own greed, a reminder of how hollow the pursuit of possession becomes when it ignores respect and understanding. The man recoiled, his confidence faltering as realization dawned. His arrogance, so certain yesterday, now seemed a fragile mask. He left, humbled not through punishment, but by the quiet authority of her moral strength. The snow outside swallowed the sound of his boots, leaving only the echo of lessons learned too late, and the stillness of the widow's cabin held its quiet triumph. The second man watched this unfold, a witness to her unspoken power and intelligence. He had seen how she moved through the delicate balance of patience and firmness, how she allowed the first man to reveal himself fully while remaining untouched by his expectations. And now, in the glow of the fire, he saw her in a new light, not merely strong, but radiant with a dignity and insight that could shape the world around her. They spoke little at first, letting the warmth of the cabin and the soft crackle of fire carry the conversation between them. A glance, a shared gesture, the simple act of moving together to feed the horses, tended the hearth, or watched the horizon. Each moment spoke of trust slowly earned, of understanding grown like frost upon glass, delicate yet enduring. Here, in these quiet interactions, a bond deepened, fragile but undeniable. Not the sudden spark of infatuation, but the slow, steady flame of respect, admiration, and mutual recognition. The widow allowed herself a soft exhale, the tension of the past days lifting like mist from the frozen fields. She realized the truth she had long known, that life's greatest rewards were not purchased with coin, nor forced by insistence, but found in the subtle gestures, the quiet kindnesses, and the patience of those who truly see. The second man, standing near the corral, had watched her not as one seeks to claim, but as one honors, and in that honoring lay the most unexpected gift of all: recognition, connection, and the promise of shared respect. Outside, snowflakes began to fall again, delicate and unhurried, each one catching the light of the morning like tiny lanterns. The world seemed suspended, a frozen tableau of justice and beauty, of intellect and moral triumph. She smiled, not triumphantly but gently, letting the warmth of the hearth and the steady presence of the second man fill the space around her. The first man's departure had closed one chapter, and now, in its quiet wake, another opened. One where understanding and respect, slow and patient, would chart the course of her life. Evening fell, soft and golden, and the cabin glowed in the amber light of the hearth. They tended the fire together, moved quietly through the snow-dusted grounds, and for a time, there was only the rhythm of life lived fully and honestly. Shadows danced across the walls, the dog curled at their feet, and in the hush between them lay the promise of enduring connection. There was no haste, no shallow expectation, only the slow unfolding of trust and the deep, soul-deep joy of being seen, truly seen and understood. And so, in the quiet of the west, beneath snow-laden trees and endless sky, the widow gifted the world a simple, profound lesson, that strength is gentle, intelligence is subtle, and the heart's greatest wealth comes not from possession, but from recognition, respect, and the courage to offer more than what is demanded. For the audience, there is a whisper here, carried on the wind. Life is richest not in the things we grasp, but in the patience with which we listen, the kindness we offer, and the understanding we share. And so, if you have watched these snowy roads and quiet fires, take a moment now to reflect, to treasure what you cannot buy, to honor what you often overlook, and to share in the quiet victories that unfold around you each day. Where are you watching from, and what quiet gift has your heart given or received today?